If you've been thinking about doing a triathlon but you don't know where to start, first of all, welcome. Welcome to the dark side. My name is Kelly and I've been doing triathlon now for a couple of years. I started running back in 2021, but before that I had done nothing. Not an ounce of exercise in my early adult, late teens life. So I pretty much started from zero and went from zero to Ironman in 2021, 2022, 2 years. So if you're a bit insane like me and you're thinking about doing the same thing, here's how I got started in triathlon and a little bit of advice on how you can too. But first, I need to finish my run, so I'll see you back at home. Okay, I am back. I am clean and I have a coffee. Wonderful. So, as I said earlier, I am a triathlete. And I'm gearing up for my third season now in triathlon. I have done 2 full distance Ironmans, 2 of the hardest, can I just add? A handful of 70.3s. Hold on, how many actual 70.3s have I done? I've done Bolton, Mallorca, Marbella, 3. Wow, it feels more than that. And then a handful of smaller events as well, sprint tries. I've weirdly never done an Olympic. I think that distance scares me a little bit because it's like that in between of Zone 5 sprint and Zone 2 Ironman. Anyway, when I started the sport, I felt like I really didn't have anyone to talk to about it and to ask for advice from. I didn't get a coach because I couldn't afford one at the time. And I did have a friend of mine who had done the Ironman that I was doing prior to that year. But I felt like I was bothering her so much by asking her loads of questions. So I really was just trying to figure it out all by myself. So if you're in the same situation, then hopefully this video is going to help you. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail about how I got into triathlon, and then I'm going to give you my views, my advice on how you can get started as well. I've been through a lot of up and downs in this sport, especially for someone who was really just starting out. I've made mistakes. I've learned from those mistakes. And now I would like to help you navigate through this niche sport, I guess I might call it. But before we get into the how, I feel it necessary to go over the why. To give you my why, because I think it takes a very particular kind of person to look at an Ironman and go, yeah, that's me, I want to do that. And I always get so emotional at the start of races, any race to be honest, whether it's a 5k or an Ironman. When you look around at all the other competitors, I get emotional because I just think everyone has been through their own unique journey to get to this point. Some of them might be positive, some of them might be negative, but everyone has been through something to get here. Been through a journey, they've climbed that mountain, and it just makes me really emotional to think and really just you're not alone. So anyway, less of the soppy stuff. A little bit of backstory. So when I was just a little girl, my parents were both very sporty. When they were younger, my mum was a swimmer and athletics kid, and my dad was a footballer. Growing up, my brother then also got into football, and I naturally was very encouraged by my parents to get into sports, and I hated it. I think I can look back and maybe say that it might have been because I was quite a competitive child. I still am a competitive child. So when I would go and do competitions, and I did do sports when I was younger, I'd do netball, I was swimming, I played tennis, I did gymnastics, and I would lose. I hated it. And I think I just decided as a kid that it was easier to take myself out of it completely rather than get upset every time I didn't win something. And I started secondary school, I started getting into dance and amateur dramatics, and I was a full-on theatre kid. A theatre nerd. I'm proud. I am not ashamed of that. So yeah, I thought that's what I wanted to do. It's potentially what I want to do. I'm just taking a little break from it, just hanging the cap up. Flash forward here. I went to uni for drama. I spent a good amount of time out of university trying to get into acting. I had just about landed my first ever full-time acting job, and then bam, Boris, school's closed, lockdown, and that was really, really hard because I felt like I'd just gotten to where I want to be, where I'd just started that path to becoming a professional actor. And I fell down a few steps basically on that ladder, and that was really quite upsetting whilst this was going on as well. So when I was at university, I did put on quite a lot of weight for a varied amount of reasons that I'm not going to go into in this video. But yeah, I was really quite on the larger side, and I was not very comfortable in my own skin, in my own body. It was quite a depressive time for me when I was just about leaving university and trying to get into acting. And that's when I sort of started running, because I would hop onto the treadmill a few times a week and do sprints until I hit 5k. But I was essentially punishing myself for years of just abusing my body with alcohol and junk food, really, and takeaways, etc. Lockdown happened. I lost my acting job. I could not sit still at home during lockdown, so I went and got a job in Amazon. I met my now husband, and in 2021 we moved to St Albans, where it was flat, and I had no friends, and I had no family, and I had no hobbies, and I had nothing else to do apart from try and run. So that's exactly what I did. I weirdly saw a friend of mine posted on Instagram. She'd just done a 2-hour run just on a random Sunday, just went out for 2 hours, and I messaged her and I said, how did you do that? And I remember the exact conversation that we had, but I remember coming away from it thinking, well, if she can do it, so can I. And I think that narrative has very much led me to where I am today, because I'm constantly, maybe it goes back to that competitiveness, but I'm constantly comparing myself to other people and thinking, well, if they can do it, so can I. Started running properly, I would say, in February 2021. Did my first marathon in September 2021, so very short turnover there. And I got addicted straight away. I booked another marathon, which was Manchester in April 2022. And it was after that marathon that I was like, what if I did an Ironman? I don't really know why I thought of it at the time. I think I was always aware of Ironman growing up because it happened in Bolton, which is where I grew up. So I sort of knew what it was. I really didn't know to what extent it was. And I remember Googling the distances and the order of things and being like, no, not a chance will I ever do something like that, especially the cycling. And then a friend of mine did it. She did Ironman Bolton in 2022, and I had that exact same thought. Well, if she can do it, so can I. So yeah, I bought a bike, I started having swim lessons, and I started my journey towards Bolton Ironman 2023. So that's my why. I think, in a nutshell, I just never really found a sport that was for me and that I enjoyed enough to continue on with it. But I think that's because the way I grew up in that kind of competitive mindset kind of turned sports into this just constant competition for me. And it was very upsetting to be constantly losing and comparing myself to others. And the reason I fell in love with running was because I'm only comparing myself to me at first. Now I do compare myself to others. Now I'm starting to be a little bit competitive in the sport. I do find myself comparing myself to others again, but I'm in the right headspace for it now, and I love the sport enough to embrace it and to kind of fuel off of it. But anyway, that's my why. So now I'm going to talk about how I started in triathlon. I gave you a little bit of insight into the timeline of things. I'm just going to go through my tips for you and explain my experience with them at the same time. Okay, coffee. I reapply the gloss. Sorry, I got a work email. Excellent. Okay, so my number one thing I would say that you need to do if you're thinking about doing a triathlon is getting all the gear that you need. So when I had decided to do a triathlon, I was already a runner, so I already had what I would describe as sufficient run gear. but I didn't have a bike and I didn't swim, so I didn't have anything that would help me in a pool at all. Now this you can obviously do gradually. You don't need to go and buy a wetsuit tomorrow to start swimming. You need to get the essential item. I mean the items that are like absolutely necessary for basic training. That being a pair of trainers and some comfortable run gear, a road bike, helmet, and maybe some cycling clothes, especially the shorts because it's got the padding that will make your experience much more comfortable. On a quick note of cycling stuff, you do not need the fancy gear. You don't need to go and get all the fancy brands that everyone else is wearing. I got all my first cycling gear from Sports Direct and then Decathlon, and I also bought quite a bit off of secondhand sites like Vinted and Depop. I've said this before on my Instagram, good cycling gear and equipment is meant to last a long time. That is why it's expensive. So if you're buying something secondhand, don't think, oh, it's only got a few more years left. Like, it should have a very long time left on its lifespan. Anyway, and obviously some suitable swimwear, cap and goggles. That's it. To get started, that is it. You do not need a heart rate monitor or cleats or a bike computer or even really a watch. All of these things are going to help you to get better at the sport. And if you do end up loving it, then by all means go out and spend loads of money. But don't go and spend hundreds of pounds if you don't know that you even want to continue with the sport yet, if you get me. Start small, start with the basics, and work your way up. Okay, secondly, you need to get comfortable with all three elements. Personally, I don't think there's a need to dive straight into a training plan. When I decided to do Bolton in 2022, well, I'd started thinking about it in 2022, so it was in August of that year that I started training, but I hadn't signed up for the race yet. I hadn't committed whatsoever yet. I gave myself from August to the January of the following year, so January 2023, to just fall in love with the sport and to practice all three elements and to know that I liked it enough to actually go and do this crazy, insane challenge. You might buy the kit and start the training and absolutely hate it and not want to touch a triathlon event with a barge pole. And that's okay, it's not for everyone. But I would say for the first couple of months, take the pressure off and just start to enjoy it first. Now, if you've gotten to that point, then it might be time to find and book a race. So as I said, for the first 4 months, I did not have a race booked. And then January 2023 was when I decided to book Ironman Bolton. Once you've decided that you're all in, I just find having a race in the calendar is the best way to stay accountable and to actually do the sessions that are on your training plan. Bite the bullet and book that race. Take what I'm gonna say here with a pinch of salt. You do not need to go straight to a full distance Ironman or even a 70.3. I say take it with a pinch of salt because that is what I did. I would like to say if I could go back I would do it differently, but I wouldn't. I loved my experience and that was just how it worked out for me. I did do a couple of sprint races before Bolton, but I do always recommend that people start smaller and work their way up. Mostly because it's a huge financial commitment, and if you're throwing yourself in that deep without A, knowing if you're going to physically be able to do it, and B, knowing if you even want to do it, then that is a lot of money to lose. It is spenny out there. The best way to find a triathlon to book, in my opinion, is to use the British Triathlon website. I would recommend doing a shorter distance like a super sprint or a sprint first, and even finding one that's potentially pool based. That's something else that I recommend my clients if they've never done one before. Then take away that element of open water and the fears and the anxiety that comes with that for some people, and do a pool-based one where you're familiar with your surroundings, you know what it feels like to swim in a pool, you don't have to worry about doing the open water training until you decide to carry on. When looking for a race, I would also try and find one that is close by to you for a few reasons, so that maybe you can go and do a little course recce, which means go and practice in the course, which they do normally release prior to the race, so you can download it and go and practice it in your training sessions, but also so that you can have a little bit of support there. Maybe you've got friends and family that can come and watch on the day and hold up a sign for you. It just makes such a big difference having that support on the side of your races. I would also pay close attention to the actual course profiles. As I said, most are available prior to the event. So if you're looking at a race that looks really hilly, think about that. Do you want to expose yourself to a challenging course for your very first one? Or should you maybe choose one that's a bit flatter? For the run, again, is it hilly? Is it paved? Is it on grass? What's the weather like this time of year? Are you likely to get caught in a load of rain? Or is it the middle of summer and it's going to be blazing hot? All of these things should be consideration when it comes to booking your first event. I realise I'm giving a lot of advice here that I didn't follow. I did do a pool one for my first triathlon though, so that's one bit of advice. It was hilly though, it was in Cheddar Gorge. Wow, that is hard to cycle up. When you start training, you should obviously expose yourself to all different kinds of routes and courses so that you know where your strengths are. I like to think I'm quite good at the hills, so I do tend to book hilly races. But I only know that because I've always trained on hills. I do not live in a flat area. Even when I was in St Albans, it was flatter, but there were still some spicy hills down there. So once you start training, you can get a feel for what kind of elevation you find to be silly. And finally, number 4, pick a training plan or build a training plan of your own or find a coach. As I said earlier, I did not have a coach. So there are quite a lot of free resources out there or downloadable resources where you can get kind of a training plan, like a 24, 32 week training plan for a race. And I got one of those for my full distance, and I just sort of modified it because obviously it wasn't fit to me as a person. I was teaching at the time, so that was really difficult to try and balance everything. So I just took the kind of knowledge that I learned from that training plan on how to build up the endurance and then made my own. Did I follow it 100%? No, absolutely not. At this point, it is very dependable on your current situation, like your fitness levels, your budget, and your race goals. Maybe you're someone who feels like they can stay more accountable if they do have a coach. And if so, great, go and find one. And if it fits within your budget and within your lifestyle, absolutely, I'd recommend having a coach. I have one now. I'm definitely more productive now than I was back in 2023. But also, some people just like to have their own training and to just get on with it. And they're very good at keeping themselves motivated and accountable. So in which case, might be no need at first for a coach. If you then end up wanting to get faster and get better, then I would say, yeah, have someone that's going to be able to help you to do that. Mostly, you just need to be prepared for whatever race you're throwing yourself into. You might also want to consider doing a bit of research into some local tri clubs. There are plenty out there, so have a Google. They can normally offer like free taster sessions. It's a really good way to meet people and to have that accountability. If you decide to opt not for a coach, then training with people really, really helps. I think that's enough from me today. If you have any beginner triathlon tips of your own, then please feel free to leave them in the comments. What helped you when you first started in this sport? Also, if you have any requests of any beginner triathlon topics that you would like me to go into a little bit more detail and talk about and make a video on, please also comment that below. Otherwise, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.